All right, so we'll go ahead and start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Recording in progress.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's council meeting. It is Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. We have an afternoon session only. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We will have a teleconference participation at this meeting from Councilmember Barber pursuant to the California Brown Act rules for just cause attendance. Councilmember Barber, please respond to the following questions. 1, can you hear me well?
Yes.
And were you able to hear proceedings on this end up until now?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes.
Give us a brief general description of the circumstances relating to your need to appear remotely.
Medical.
Is anyone over the age of 18 with you in the room?
No.
Can everybody clearly hear Councilmember Barber? All right, that's positive affirmation from everybody in the chamber. That requires that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting be taken by roll call. And we'll pass it to Clementine for roll call and to share with the public about how to participate in public comment.
Councilmember Barber,
Present.
Councilmember Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
and Mayor Williamson.
Here.
And information on participating in today's meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is available on the meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. Remote commenters, you will be muted until it is your turn to speak, and a timer will be shown on the screen. If you're connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. In-person attendees must keep their phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with our meeting. Thank you for participating in your city government.
Thank you, Clementine. And with that, I'll ask Councilmember Hoffa to lead us off with the pledge.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Alan. With that, we'll go into general public comments. This is for items that are not on today's agenda. So just to share with everybody, if you're in the chamber, I'll ask for you to either raise your hand or stand to the left of the podium. And for those that are on Zoom, to use the raise hand function. I'm going to ask everybody to identify yourself at the beginning, and then we'll cut it off. So anybody that doesn't identify themselves before the cutoff will not be able to speak. So I'll start off in the chamber. Anybody wish to speak for general public comment? I see 1 standing, 2. Is there anybody behind Mr. Lightfoot? I see the 3. So we have 3 in the chamber, and then I'll do a countdown for the raise hand function via Zoom to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we have 2 online. So we'll go ahead and start in the chamber, please.
I presume I get 3 minutes this time for the second time in 7 months. And I'm being blocked visually. Is there a reason why I'm being blocked visually?
Please go ahead. You're on.
Well, the sign I'm holding up, folks, says October 9, last chance rally, downtown Monterey, noon, people. That would be John Lennon's birthday. And after March 1st, I'm moving to Utah. And then you'll be left holding the bag of shame. I hate to say it. Now, this is a big story, big story. Too many homosexuals spoiled the pot, is what I'm going to tell the world someday. California was too gay, and it's a fact. The homosexual community is the most resentful of what I do, of all the people out there. There's got to be something wrong with that. So yeah, that's why I'm moving, because 3% is much better for me to break this story. John Lennon, LennonMurderTruth.com. Now, lately, a lot of people on KSCO radio were taking pot shots at Steve Lightfoot, the John Lennon man. Usually these people are homosexuals, no kidding. They don't deny it when I'm confronting them about it, including Rory from Watsonville. Thinks he's high and mighty as a father of 9, yet he can't stand up to Stephen King molesting his children after he killed his hero. Yeah, folks, Stephen King getting John Lennon's autograph. That's something that matters. Mark David Chapman's name and attached letter linking himself to Reagan is moving him armed into a hostile square in U.S. News 3 weeks before the murder. That matters, folks. Richard Nixon's book next to Reagan, the day of the murder, under the headline, Who's In, Who's Out, talks about killing John Lennon. I'm not kidding. The guy who we tried to deport during the 70s. So the matter matters. You're either all constantly protecting or constantly punishing Stephen King. You're never not doing one or the other. Right now, I would have to say, in light of the fact that Monterey has especially boycotted my magazine, I would say that the people have come out against the story. What a shame. What a shame. Yesterday, Rory of Watsonville says, well, even if Stephen King did kill John Lennon, what difference does it make? It's not important. If you think that, people, you're not even a human being. You're not even, you have no class. You have no decency, no self-respect. October 9 is John Lennon's birthday. It is your last chance to demonstrate with me at noon right there by Rosine's on Alvarado Street. Because believe me, if anyone can expose things, it's me. And you should hear me on the radio lately to my detractors, calling them right out for what they are: slobs, losers, jealous people, small people, taking pot shots at the hero. If you only knew how sad you all are, how miserable and bitter you all are, you'd wake up. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Jean Rash, Monterey Vista. I have to remember to bring my sage with me so we can burn it. In preparation for forums and meet and greets, a lot of people have asked about climate change, and I went in and looked around, and I just wanted to share with people who might not have known, like I didn't know, that we have a 2016 climate action plan, and it's really well written. And I commend it to anyone who had the many questions that they've reached out to me about. It applauds the city. From 2005 to 2012, our carbon emissions went down 7%. And the city of Monterey is 100% using renewable energy for city functions. That was fascinating. What wasn't so fascinating was the Coastal Commission's projections of sea rise. And it's a little scary, but I just thought it was so well done that maybe other people want to learn about it the way I just learned about it. The sea rise is estimated by 2030 to be 1 to 12 inches, by 2050, 12 to 24 inches, by 2100, up to 65 inches. So a little scary, but I commend it to your reading. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good afternoon. Luis Osorio. I wasn't going to say this, but I think I have to repudiate the comments that were made earlier about people in general. The comment that I came to make was I wanted to thank Council Member Smith for having a get together for the downtown folks last week ago, last Saturday. Unfortunately, I could not attend, but I appreciate that. I think it's something that could or should be done more frequent. I think the downtown is a living creature, as you know. The comment specifically that I wanted to make tonight or today is about the Ocio building, specifically about the commercial spaces at the Ocio building. The theaters have been shut down for about 5 years now. And the three commercial spaces on that building are also non-functional. There is the commercial space on Calle Principal, which is called Visions. That place, they must be paying $500 a month because it's never open, and it's very obvious that whoever owns that business don't need that business. And so I think we need to approach the owner of the building and approach the business owner and ask the questions. I think it's part and parcel of what we should be doing for the economic stability of the downtown. Also, the building, the commercial space on Alvarado Street has been papered up for about 6 months. The people that own that business own 3 other businesses similar in other parts of the peninsula, and they seem to be using that space as their warehouse. So I think these are critical commercial spaces for the downtown, and I think the economic development in the city and the city council, we should be doing something about, because this is a critical space for the downtown. And I think I also read somewhere that the big movie companies are reinvesting in their movie theaters in the shopping centers and that. And I think there may be a chance to talk to them. This is a critical space. Thank you.
With that, we'll take it online.
I'm calling on Ms. Beatty on the telephone.
Good evening. This is Nina Beatty. I sent an email this afternoon to the City Council asking that the agendas be released earlier in the week. Today's agenda was released approximately 4 o'clock on Friday. This complies strictly with the state guidelines, but not the spirit of the state guidelines. It only allows 1 full business day for the public to contact staff and you after they've read materials. Other governments release documents early as soon as they're ready, and then they release revised agendas if they need to. So at this point, the public has very little time to review and comment on documents. If that is not, if the intent of the council is that the public has good access to the business of the city, the rules, and rule that agendas and documents are posted at the latest by Thursday or 96 hours before a meeting, with revised agendas to be posted if needed. But the information can be out to the public sooner. If you're serious about the public having access to information, and I also again request, as I have in the past, that you change rules and send notice to renters, who are a majority in the city, of all land use projects in their neighborhood, and also to extend notification distances to 500 or even 1,000 feet. That way the public is really able to be informed and able to be involved in their government. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the trees I saw along Del Monte on the recreation trail, which were in the process of being hacked by city contractors. Now, when you approved the contracts, is that what you approved? There is no wildland there. There's no wild space. There's no need or fire danger in these areas, but there are large branches that are being cut severely back by contractors. I was in Salinas a few weeks ago and I witnessed a similar thing. In fact, there were birds' nests clearly visible in the branches of the tree, and they had eliminated, huge branches that were, 6 inches in diameter, or in diameter, being cut. For what reason? No idea. No wildland around there, no fire danger. If you want to talk about climate change, trees are fundamental to halting, slowing down climate change and in contributing to the health, as well as being living beings, as living as you or I. We need educated foresters. We need naturalists who are involved and see this peninsula, see this community as a habitat as a whole, and that we need to protect it. It's very disturbing to go past shopping centers like where the Monte Vista area, where there's a shopping center.
All right, thank you. Your time is up. And the next speaker is Mr. Barrage. Mr. Barrage, please unmute and you can go ahead.
Oops, sorry. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for your time, Mayor Williamson and council members. My name is Peter Barrage, and I am commenting on an item not on the agenda, but one that will be on your agenda in coming weeks. This comment is also a follow-up to the letter I emailed yesterday to the mayor, city manager, city council, and Parks and Recreation Department and commissioners regarding the old Capitol site master plan. In addition to my letter, I sent a 5-page write-up which outlines the many benefits that the old Capitol site could provide to city government and to our community at large, but only if we integrate those desired outcomes into the plan to begin with. For any of you who have received emails from me on this topic before, I want to thank you for your time and consideration. I like to think that I'm pretty self-aware, so I want to acknowledge humbly that I have a lot to say about what happens at the old Capitol site. Sometimes maybe it feels like I have too much to say for some of you. I sincerely appreciate you hearing me out each and every time. My letter was also critical of the Parks and Recreation Department and BFS Landscape Architects. I want you to know that I did not take that criticism lightly. Over the past 6 months, I have engaged extensively with Director Larson, her staff, and the commissioners. I am grateful for the forum they have provided, for their consistent support and responsiveness, and I don't want to damage the mutually beneficial relationship we have built. But the fact is, they are not trail developers, and the Old Capitol site is a trails project more than it is a traditional park space project. With that said, I had to speak out. I am passionate about conservation and recreation because I spend a lot of time reading about other communities and how they have used trails projects like this to produce tangible and significant contributions to a responsible tourism economy, to community resiliency, community development, transportation, social and health benefits, and much more. By doing so, they're able to get needed support with funding, planning, building, and maintenance. Conservation and recreation used to be opposing forces, but these days they are complementary forces, and together they are multipliers. Over the past 6 months, I've spent hundreds of hours and hundreds of dollars advocating for a bike park and mountain bike trails in the Old Capitol site. I hope you can see that me and the rest of the cycling community aren't just doing this so we have a great place to ride. If that was all we cared about, I'd put my bike in the car and drive up to Santa Cruz. The reason I am so adamant about putting bikes first in this plan is because there is very credible evidence that a bike park and mountain bike trails will do exactly what I propose they will. And I don't want to see Monterey miss that opportunity. I don't want my children to miss that opportunity. Fast tracking a plan that builds more hiking trails is a waste of the city's money. We already have hundreds of hiking trails within city limits, and bikes are prohibited on every one of them. Please slow down. Invite partners and subject matter experts to the table. We have proposed solutions to costs, environmental mitigation, parking, maintenance, and more. But if you don't invite us to the table, it isn't going to happen. We can't do that work in the span of 3-minute public comments. Please, please, please read my write-up. Thank you for your time.
That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for those that provided public comment today. With that, we'll move to consent agenda. Anybody wish to pull anything on the council? Nope. Dr. Barber? Nope. Okay. We'll take it out to the public. This is a time to speak on any of the items that are on the consent agenda, or you can also request an item be pulled. So check in with folks in the chamber. Anybody wish to pull anything or speak on the consent agenda? All right, I'm seeing none. We'll check online. I'll do a countdown for folks to use the raise hand function via Zoom to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have one person online.
Go ahead, Ms. Beatty.
This is Nina Beatty. I'm disturbed that the council elected not to pull item 7 off the consent agenda. As I wrote to you earlier, today I had listened in on the Planning Commission meeting, and they were given quite different information that's provided than is provided in your staff report. This property in question is city-owned property. And there was Mr. Hill, who was a planning manager, I understand, told the Planning Commission that there would be, the land would be appraised, and then it would be offered to adjacent property owners at that fair market value. But this is not the information that was provided in your staff report. The information was that this is going to be given away. There will be no money exchanged. This will revert. There was no talk about reversion because this is a separate piece of property. It doesn't belong to any adjacent property owner. So this item number 7 needs to go back to the Planning Commission and the real situation sorted out so that the public can figure out what's going on here. So I ask you to send this back to the Planning Commission so they can reconsider this and have a new vote, and then it can come back to you for consideration. This just doesn't smell right to me. And I hope that you will do the right thing. Thank you.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. It wasn't quite clear to me if she was asking for that to be pulled. It was just. Let me just ask, is she still online? Nina, could you just let us know yes or no if you wanted that to be pulled?
What was the question again?
If you wanted the item to be pulled?
I had hoped that you were going to pull item 7. So I was commenting on item 7, that it should be pulled.
So to clarify, you're asking for it to be pulled?
If you want a presentation on it, I have the information that I need, but do you have the information you need? I don't have any further comments to make on it. So
Thank
I'm
you.
hoping that the council wants some
Thank you.
more information.
Thank you for the clarification. All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the council. Leave it open for a motion and deliberation.
So I'm fine for an approval, because the way I read it is that this is one step we're included in a process. This is a process that will be facing again on a hearing in November. So I'm comfortable with what I see in the presentation in the staff's agenda item. So I'm ready to approve this tonight.
Is that a motion, sir?
It's a motion to approve all the consent items.
Yes, sir.
Including item number 7.
Okay.
Second,
Okay, it's been motion and seconded. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Barber,
yes.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Yes.
Mayor Williamson.
That's a yes for me. Thank you, Nita, for your comments on that. And I think Ed kind of spoke to it well. So with that, we'll go ahead to our study session. Item number 9 is to receive a report on the history of the Lower Presidio lease agreement and receive initial feedback on future plans for the lease. With that, I'll pass it to Hans for staff introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. In front of you is an agenda report as well as a presentation that we are sharing with you tonight that basically sets the stage for future conversations about the Presidio lease agreement and the future of that lease agreement. Over the course of many years, this has been a part of the city operations. And we wanted to use this opportunity as part of a study session to share with you some of the history of that space, and also to give you some background on the Lower Presidio. As you know, the city of Monterey has several special relationships with the Presidio of Monterey that have been established for quite some time. Not only was the city of Monterey founded on the same day as the Presidio of Monterey, but also several areas of the Presidio of Monterey were part of the city operations. I remind all of us of the Child Care Development Center that we for a while had as part of a lease, and that was very successful for 20+ years. Until we actually couldn't find a provider, and we also couldn't find staffing for that provider to operate it. There's a pristine area behind the 800 series buildings and close to the Highway 68 there, Highway 218, which is the Huckleberry Hill Preserve, where also the city of Monterey still has an existing agreement to preserve that and maintain that area. And then, of course, the area in the Lower Presidio, there where we also have a lease agreement, and that's what we will be discussing tonight. The next slide, please. This area has been used or has been in the history of this area for thousands of years. It was used by Native Americans as the first people, as the first folks that lived there, and later it became part of a garrison where the Spaniards, the Mexicans, short time the Argentinians, and then ultimately the United States Army took over that garrison. And it is rightfully also called the heart of Alta California. The city of Monterey entered into a 50-year lease for that area in 1996. And the area in question is about 25.15 acres of public access. Here's an aerial to basically show you where that is. And when you look a little bit to the right, you see the sliver of water. And what you see also is it's surrounded by Lighthouse Avenue, and it is probably the premier piece of property in the city of Monterey with respect to the views and the accessibility in the heart of our city. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit about the history. In the 1980s, especially under the Reagan administration, the idea was born to get rid themselves of land assets that cost the Department of Defense a lot of money, but they are and they are really pieces of properties that have no real operational value for the military. And so at that time, it was actually proposed by the United States Army to dispose the Lower Presidio and sell it to private developers. And I just spoke about this. Wouldn't we all like to own a nice house there with those views? And so the Army recognized that, and a little sidebar out of those efforts also in the 1980s was actually born the BREC process, base realignment and closure process, because the Congress realized that you cannot just close bases, or you cannot just sell surplus land without a public process. But having said all that, in 1984, Congressman Leon Panetta worked with a subcommittee or the Armed Services Committee subcommittee on military installations to basically reject the Army's proposal, because at that time also a coalition of city leaders as well as other leaders really didn't want that land to fall into the hand of developers, because they realized it, how pristine it was. They also realized it, how what value it has to our today's population and to our today's economy. Next slide. Here are some screenshots from the newspaper from 1984. Salinas, Californian was still in existence at that time, and there it is. A lease agreement would save the Army money. That was the background of that. And what the city of Monterey said, give it to us, and we would preserve it as an open area for public park and recreation use. And next slide. The success was clear. The land sale was blocked, and the land was then discussed, where should it go? And city attorney William Marsh said, well, it can be maintained by the city, it can be maintained by the state parks, it can go to a national federal system, but ultimately the objective was to preserve that land. And that's from the Monterey Peninsula Herald from September 19th, 1984, almost, 40 years ago, a little more than 40 years ago. So despite all those efforts, nobody wanted take the land off the hand of the city or the federal agency. I actually welcome our former community development director, Bill Walkowski, because in the course of that, there are actually of our research, we discovered some memos that Bill wrote about some meetings that they had with state parks in the beginning to figure out if state parks would like to play a role. And they kind of bailed early on, I want to say. So next slide. That led 1996 then basically for the city to take over that land for 50 years with the purpose of developing an historic park. We wanted to have the land accessible, and we wanted to be sure that all of the history will be celebrated there. The city was responsible for minimal functions, the maintenance functions that includes keeping the restroom working and open, and maintenance and cleaning of that, litter control, including also mowing and looking after the property in general terms, but also taking over the existing Presidio Museum. At that time, there was an Army museum that was really not being used. And the city was saying, we take over that museum and we will display historic artifacts in there, and we work together with Monterey History and Arts Association, with other donors, and also the Monterey Public Library. So that all happened between 1996 and the early 2000s, that the city basically established itself as one of the factors there. Next slide. Over the years, probably over $1 million in city funds have been invested there. We are absolutely grateful for some major infusions from the NCIP, but also the Old Monterey Foundation helped channel grants into the area, and a lot of the improvements you see today that are being enjoyed by the visitors there, the trails, the signage, other elements were funded out of this mix of CIP, NCIP, and grants from Old Monterey Foundation. And you see also some of the board members of OMF here in the audience tonight. Next slide. Okay, I already spoke about some of the things we are doing. Every year we have to provide a report to the Department of the Army, to the Real Estate Division, outlining what we have done so far and what we have done annually. And one of the reports is actually attached to that. What we will now talk to you about more will be part of the history, because it's worthwhile to take a little deeper dive into the history. And then we will share with you some of the concerns that lead us to tonight's study session, where we have to figure out what is the future role of the city of Monterey. To what degree do we want to continue to channel city tax dollars towards that property? And there are in the agenda report quite a number of questions that we will raise with you as well. And again, we don't expect any answers, but what we hope is to lay the foundation together with public input for future conversations and discussions and how we are treating that. There is definitely a different understanding on the Army side. The generation has been relieved of duty that understood we are taking it off their hands and should be custodians. And there has been a new understanding created on the Army side that has more, shall we say, concrete ideas about what the city has to do as future investments. So that's the general topic that we will pursue throughout the evening. And with that, I think the next slide is the slide for our library director, Brian, who I thank very much, who has found a lot of good firsthand resources to help us appreciate the topic, including the most recent history that I just presented as if I knew all that. It comes from a lot of anecdotal knowledge, but backed up now by Brian's excellent research. So thank you for that. And with that, our library director will talk about the history more.
All right. Thank you, Hans, and thank you to Honorable Mayor and our council and all the members in attendance and also online. But the site of that hill was once known as Hunakil, and I might be pronouncing these wrong, and the Monterey as the village of Achista. So this is a known site of the first peoples of the Ohlone tribes of the Esalen Nation and the Rumsian Nation. This is actually a drawing, I believe it's Jose Cordero drawing of the Rumsian Ohlone there. But they're also the first abalone divers. So that's why we find abalone on those sites. They find that and they know that based on their ear shape of the Rumsians. But this site is one of the very few sites that's in Monterey on the National Register of Historic Places. So keep that in mind throughout this. And there's a lot of different interesting points right here on this site here. Our Buffalo soldiers were stationed there. They also built camps up on top in the upper Presidio up there. There's houses up there. But the 9th and 10th Cavalry were sent here after they were stationed in the Philippines and Cuba. They fought in the Philippines and Cuba. They were not allowed to fight east of the Mississippi. They weren't allowed to serve east of the Mississippi. So they came here to Monterey through San Francisco to Monterey. They came to train horses in Pacific Grove, on the cavalry stables there in Monterey, before then leading to become the first U.S. Park Rangers. So our first U.S. Park Rangers leading Yosemite, Sequoia National Parks led way right here through Monterey. This photo actually found at the Pacific Grove Museum of Natural History. This photo is kind of a little bit blurry, but that painting right there will show you kind of what the Presidio would have looked like before we had what's called Minnie's Ditch, which is the lighthouse tunnel, named after the former mayor. But the road that came up there, that's where Father Sarah and Gaspar Portola landed right there on there. And that was the road, and later a train road over there too. But that painting is done by Agatha Few. We're in the Few Memorial Building right now. Agatha Few left her estate to actually build City Hall and our city businesses next to Colton Hall. So Agatha Few, that painting was donated to us, and it's in the Presidio Monterey Museum. But 1602, Sebastian Vizcaino called it Monterey for the Count de Monterey. And at the time, he said how warm the waters were, how beautiful the sand was, and gave this just wonderful description. So people kept sailing past. They kept seeing the cold water and the kind of the rough water coming in and the trees. He painted just a very lovely picture. So it wasn't until 1770, Spain came up to start claiming the land. But it's the site of the only land and sea battle on the west coast of the United States. So when Argentina was at war with Spain, Argentina, that's why we have the cannonballs that were shot in there inside the site. And the Sloat Monument. The Sloat Monument was built at what they call the semi-centennial, 50 years after the capture of Monterey for the United States. So Commodore Sloat landed up there, claimed without fighting this area for the United States. And that was important because at the time you had from the East Coast to the West Coast control of the entire country. And 2 weeks later, Britain was set to land here. Russia was coming in from the north. So there was influence from other sides, and that was a big thing for Commodore Sloat. So 50 years later, they decided they were going to build a monument. That monument up there was first going to be built in San Francisco and damaged in the 1906 earthquake. So it came in, I think, around 1910. That's actually a part. We have a huge panoramic picture that's of the Sloat Memorial being installed up there on top of the hill. They actually built like temporary roads to get up there on the site. But in 2002, there was an interpretive master plan developed. That was part of the initial lease, was that we would have an interpretive plan of like how to set up the different signage, the walkways, interpret different levels of history. And that was done in partnership with Old Monterey Foundation over time. Over 20 years of historic work and interpretation by city museum staff. So the city museum staff have worked with different community partners to actually do the signage, do the different interpretations inside the museum and everything. But this site represents 7,000 plus years of history. It's one of the only sites in California that represents collective Rumsian Ohlone, Esalen Ohlone, Spanish, Mexican, and United States stories. It's just that one site. So that's a very significant site here in Monterey to tell the different stories to the public. Historic sites, as I mentioned, there's a Rumsian Ohlone birthing stone. It's also, some people call it a rain rock. From the Ohlones that I've spoken to, they believe it's women would go up there to dig, and you see the little holes inside of it during when they were getting pregnant. The Alexo Nino cross is the first non-Indigenous person was buried in Alta, California. So he was a freed Black slave. He was a caulker on the ship for Father Sarah and died the day before they landed. And so after Father Sarah had mass at where now the cross is, the granite cross, which is on California State Parks land, at the granite cross, there was an old oak tree. They buried Alexo Nino. So when the ditch was built, they put the cross to represent Alexo Nino on the top of the Presidio. The Bouchard Monument, which I briefly spoke on. And then the Sarah Monument, which is a granite monument donated by Jane Stanford, wife of Leland Stanford from Stanford University, and trains and all of that. And they built a temporary train to bring that up that hillside. And I mentioned that because you're never going to build another train up the hill to take down that granite statue up there. And as I mentioned with Sloat Monument, if you go up to Sloat Monument, you'll see stones from all across California, different stones representing the different counties at that time where people donated money to build it to represent the founding of California. With that, it's a very sensitive archaeological site for Indigenous Ohlone peoples. And I will mention the Ohlone people still live and thrive today, are people that are from the Rumsian and Esalen, Salinan, the different tribes, the Costanoan tribes here in the Tibet Peninsula still. And so having a site for them, they're not removed and they're not forgotten. And as a historically significant site on the National Register of Historic Places, work is guided by Secretary of Interior standards. So whenever we do any work on there, you have to work on one of these 4 guidelines, either preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, or reconstruction. Because it's historically significant, it's just like thinking about doing something at Colton Hall. You have to do something to that building which fits into, and that land, you have to build in anything with that land that fits into the theme of that specific place and time. With that, I think I might be handing it over to Andrea Rennie.
Good afternoon, Mayor Williamson, council members, members of the public. This is a really tough act to follow because it's fascinating. So I'll try to make it a little bit fascinating. So we do have some improvements and challenges that I wanted to talk about. And as Brian mentioned, this is a very archaeological and historic site. So we are always very careful on any project that we do. We have a lot of considerations. We don't like digging. As you can see, some of the signs in this walkway that we did as part of an NCIP project, the signs actually don't have an underground foundation like we normally do. They're above the ground. And as you can see, the trail was also designed to minimize any disruption to the site. So in talking about projects over the years, I know Hans mentioned a little bit. So we have over $1.2 million in CIP and NCIP projects invested there over the years. We have a number of walkways, the walkway to Slope Monument and the walkway through Lower Presidio. We have some park improvements. We have the entry signs in the first slide. We have some interpretive signage, a study for the stables, and slope monument repair. So a small portion of the repair was done in 2010. We do have another project for more repair to slope monument. So we did also a little bit of digging on our end in Public Works, not as fascinating as Brian's, but these are a couple of old photos. So you can see Lighthouse Avenue in oh gosh, my eyesight's not that great, but you can see the 1894. Thank you. I need glasses. So, and then Lighthouse Curve, and you can see a little bit of the slope, and you can see Lower Presidio there. You can see before the tunnel was built. So Presidio Curve, I wanted to focus just a little bit on that area because that is a bit of a challenge. And so what we did is we built a small retaining wall, a wood retaining wall. So most of the slope and the area to the left of that photo is Army property. And we have city right away. So I know it's a little bit difficult to tell, but if you just think of back of sidewalk is Army property. And you can see the wall that we built in city right away was to actually collect some of that material that was falling onto the sidewalk. So I'm going to show you a little bit. And so one of the challenges that we have is in 2021, we did receive a letter from the Army, and it was requesting that the city participate in funding design and construction of a full slope height. So that's the full height of the slope at Lighthouse Curve, and it was a retaining wall to prevent deposits originating from burrowing animals from falling onto the sidewalk. So I took a couple of pictures and I went and walked around quite a bit. So you can see there that as these ground squirrels and the animals dig and burrow, a lot of the material ends up falling on the sidewalk by Lighthouse Curve. And this is the Army sign just for reference. And for reference also, there's the wood retaining wall where the arrow is. So I want to go back a couple of slides. And this is the wood retaining wall that the city put in our property. And you can see it is retaining that material that the burrowing animals dislodge. So going back. Okay, so what are the cost estimates for this full slope high retaining wall? So it was $1.5 million, and that was an estimate from the Department of Public Works and the Army. and it was in 2021 dollars. So it's probably going to be quite a bit more today to design and construct. Other considerations that we have, as Brian mentioned, this is a historic site, an archaeological site. So we do have to have consultations with tribe and historic, and we have to do an EIS. And we also have to have, it's in a coastal commission zone, so we have to have other permits. We likely also have to have review from the Army Corps of Engineers of any design that we do. And the challenges really that we have right now are lack of funding. So I think you remember back in May, we had a presentation on the city's infrastructure needs. We had a lack of funding for our own facilities and infrastructure. We have engineering staff shortage. We're now again at 50% vacancy. And there are opportunity costs too. So if we have staff focus on the retaining wall, then what's going to happen is other important projects such as, Measure S projects are going to have to go to the back burner, and our own city infrastructure could suffer from that. So those are the opportunity costs and some of the challenges that city staff would have with funding and designing and building this retaining wall. And this is just for a visual. You can see that it is quite a height wall if there was to be a wall there. And not only that, but construction would impact Lighthouse Curve quite a bit. We'd have to likely close one lane for quite a while. So there are a lot of challenges with constructing a retaining wall there as requested by the Army. So just in kind of circling back, we did receive a letter in March of 2021, and I'm going to read from the letter. This is exactly from what the letter said. Presidio Monterey recognizes that COVID-19 had a devastating impact on the city of Monterey's tax base and budget. Still, POM, as the landowner, must ensure that the land leased as the Lower Presidio Historic Park is protected and managed in accordance with the law. And so I know Hans mentioned a lot of the maintenance that we do there and the investment that we've had over the years. But one of the biggest challenges that I see right now with Public Works is the cost and staffing of implementing the request for a retaining wall.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council and members of the public. So we've heard this afternoon from our city manager talking about why and how and the original purpose behind the Lower Presidio lease. And first and foremost, that's to provide public open space and access. We continue to hear how valued the park is to members of the public to eat, to visit, to experience. But we've also heard about some of the challenges that we currently face as a staff from the public works side, whether it's relating to the retaining wall or maintenance of the Lower Presidio Historic Park. Over $1 million funded from city funds towards this asset, while we have challenges maintaining other city infrastructure and other parks within our neighborhoods, within our community. Just earlier today, we were talking with park staff, the ADA transition plan, which we'll be bringing before you later this year, over $8 million in currently underfunded ADA-related projects in city parks alone we'll be sharing with you. So this is just one example of the challenges that we have. Some of the questions that before you for consideration this afternoon as we continue down and this path of having the study session today is, should the city continue to lease this property from the Army, given that the land is now fully protected from future developments and turned into a historic park? Will the U.S. Army continue to provide open access to the park if the city decides to terminate the lease early? And this is an option based on our current lease agreement, is to terminate the lease early. And verbally, we've heard from the Army garrison commanders who've shared with us that they are interested in continuing to provide open space access to the park if this is something that we're interested in. Should the city continue to invest general fund dollars into the maintenance and preservation of this area? And can the city afford to continue the lease given its competing priorities with other city services and assets? This past year, you've heard from staff about these funding challenges, not only city parks, but other city infrastructure. So it's a question that we're posing before you. Can we continue to maintain this lease given those competing priorities that we have? Another question is whether or not the city can remain in a low cost to no cost compliance with the increasing demands and requirements from the Department of the Army. Andrea shared with you the quote from the recent letter from the Army. How can the city manage the increased expectations from our partner? And another question is whether or not state and or other federal agencies be better equipped, educated, and funded to enter into a new lease. One of the avenues we've explored recently is whether or not the city should pursue or advocate for a national monument or a national historic site designation that can help meet the goals of the lease and the goals from 40 years ago when this was first discussed at the federal level. Part of that would require working with the National Park Service. It would be a lift in terms of working and lobbying with Congressman Panetta as well as our US senators, but it is an option. It's an option because every year there are a number of National Park Service sites that are created based on national significance. And Brian had shared with us, it's very clear that this location, Lower Presidio Historic Park, does have a significance at the national level. Since this land is truly a unique historical place, should there be a regional agency or a nonprofit to enter into a new lease? Is this an option that can meet all of our needs, all of the goals of the community to preserve open space, to protect the land, and to ensure that it's maintained well and into the future? So these are questions for consideration before you. And staff, we're here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, staff. That was like a true team effort there, and there was a lot of information. So appreciate everybody chipping in and doing their part. Bring it to the council for questions. Councilman Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you all for the presentation. So I have a couple questions, just out of curiosity for myself, if maybe staff has any idea to what extent our residents use this space, either formal or informal data that's been gathered, even ballpark?
So I'll say we don't keep track of the cars going in and out of there, but in the packet, you'll see the annual report. We give out an annual report to the U.S. Army, and that has the attendance. And so we're open right now only Saturday and Sunday. Post-pandemic, we've only done 2 days a week in museum hours, but other days a week, people use that as a bike path. I see that in the morning, people ride on their bikes to go from New Monterey to get down onto Pacific Street, and people walk their dogs or have their dogs off leash, you know, they're not supposed to, but but we have dogs out there.
Cover your ears.
We have, I know, we have people go out there. I was out there the other day. There was a wedding being held out there, like out by the Sarah Monument. So there's different uses that people use that park, but the only document, and some people run up the hill to go up to the Slope Monument as well. The only documentation we would have on usage is really tied to the
Museum.
attendance at the museum, which is roughly like 40 to 50. But then we also do get tours that go over there. So sometimes we do get people from actually the Presidio, from the USAG, that come over there to give tours at the site, and different schools come over there to give tours at the museum.
You mentioned the wedding. So who would be coordinating that?
I think these people did it just on their own, because typically,
Okay.
if there is an event, we actually, as in, I will communicate with my staff and with Hans, and then we will communicate with the Army for any use of the space. So we don't have the Lower Presidio Historic Park on the park's website. People contact us because there's a lot of different hoops that we have to run through to have any kind of event over there. There's nothing, we can't charge anything. There's a lot of different things that happen for any kind of event. But when they used to do History Fest and Civil War reenactment, that was done in partnership between the city and USAG.
Thank you for that. That goes to the second question that I had, which has to do with amenities. Any amenities that we'd be able to maybe formalize, right, in an effort to reduce that financial impact to the city. I don't know if that's something that staff could work into the lease or anything like that, but just throwing it out there.
If you want me to respond, I can respond just on that, which was that as far as I recall, I don't have the lease in front of me, but that we cannot raise revenue off of any activities on the property itself.
Got
The museum is pretty low attendance,
Mhm.
because it's pretty static in terms of there. So we don't charge for people to go in there, and it's actually volunteer. Primarily, we have volunteers, docents that run that museum. And some of our sites, like we still have the blacksmith shop in there, and the blacksmith shop is, years. It has a ton of work needed, and we did have to take down the stables over there just because of the poor shape they were at. And the only other buildings that are there are primarily operated by the Army. So there's no new buildings that I could see as revenue generating
Mhm.
on that property over there.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Barber?
Yes, thank you so much for staff and all the hard work and research that went into this, from all values, from planning and from historical pieces. So a couple questions. Was this, and I think you said this, but I wanted to make sure I understood this correctly. Was this part of the dollar amount that you presented with CIP needs several months ago? That's the first question.
No, it was not.
Okay. Second, was there a specific definition what maintenance and protection, quote unquote, would be within from the Army as a leasee?
Yes, there is, and that includes the items that we described with respect to having the museum maintained and open, have the restrooms maintained and open, conduct occasionally mowing, and having the area in a controlled, litter controlled state, etc. So that these are basically to preserve the area as is.
Okay, so in part of the preservation, the retaining wall is part of that.
No,
Okay, so this is outside of the regular quote unquote maintenance and preservation and protection of the land. Is that correct?
yes. When you take a look at the photographs that Andrea shared with you, when you take also at the painting by Pew, if you will see that the hill looks basically the same way as the hill looked 300-400 years ago. It's the Army's contention or assumption that there is erosion taking place through the rodents, and they want to ensure that this is being preserved through the wall. When you see those erosion, or when you see the rodents basically throwing the dirt on the sidewalks, many of those piles of dirt contain shells, abalone shells, contain other artifacts of that historic site that basically are being dug up by those rodents. And what we have also done, I believe, in the last 3 years, at least twice, once fully funded by the Army, the second time we shared the cost, is basically every pile of dirt that you see today when you drive by Lighthouse Cove has to be manually removed, and it has to be inventoried where the dirt was, and then a group of archaeologists goes to a different space in the Presidio and uses sifters to identify what the artifacts or what the elements are that they pick up there, and then they have to be treated in accordance with Native American standards, etc. And so what the Army envision is that by building a large-scale retaining wall, you will prevent the deposits from, of course, going onto the sidewalk around Presidio Curve. And they also believe that the retaining wall will prevent the ongoing erosion of that site. As I stated earlier, when you look at photo documentation and you look at the historic paintings, the hill looks essentially the same way as it looked probably when Father Sarah climbed up on the hill and held the mass. So there is not an alignment of the understanding of the site between army and city anymore. And the question before us right now is, at the end, should the city invest into the site with taxpayer dollars into basically a site that is owned by federal land? And also the key question goes back there. The land has been preserved. The objective that the city originally had was ensuring that there will be no private development, there will be no mansion built, and no way can this happen anymore. So in the 80s, the situation was completely different. 40 years later, nobody will dare to do anything to that site. And the question, basically the key question is, should we invest city dollars into federal land for things that we then could maybe spend differently into other assets that we actually own and operate, and maybe also that benefit our residents differently than this kind of a small, very interesting, very historic park that is being used, but maybe not as much used as maybe other assets in the city of Monterey, i.e. a police station or a fire station.
Okay, thank you. So with that, would not the Army be open to being able to collaborate with the cost, with this type of cost, since this is something that it sounds like has been done in the past?
Yes, and that's the key question. Do we want to collaborate? Do we want to spend local taxpayer dollars on that? Or do we want to, at the end of the day, say, Army, the property is yours, here you have it back, and do whatever you feel doing with it? I mean, there is, we also showed a different pathway that basically is there taking maybe a nonprofit into the lease, have Army negotiate with a nonprofit, creating maybe a national historic park out of that. Maybe the state is interested in that. So there are various options. It does not have to involve the city in the future. And that's the key question also in front of the public and the council at one time. Do you want to keep the city involved with that? Do you want to spend city resources on that land after the city has accomplished what we went out to accomplish in the 80s, which is protect the land, preserve the land from federal sales? We have done that. So that's the future discussion, and that's the decision the council and the public have to weigh. And then ultimately it's up to the council to decide where you want to go with that.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess my only other thing would be, since dealing with the historical pieces that you asked, my last question will be, I was wanted to get clarification. Brian seemed to say that there was a registry that we were part of, but then that said that we would have to go and talk to the registry. So I was kind of confused about that. Like, is it the National Historic Registry we're part of, or is it a local historic registry? Can I get clarification, please?
Yeah, great question, Dr. Barber. That site is on the National Register of Historic Places, and it's a national register that includes a variety of not just federal sites, but local, privately owned, nonprofit owned. It only signifies it as a place of historical significance and does not dictate who maintains or manages the site. If we were to pursue a National Park Service option, it would be to have it be a actual national historic site that is part of the National Park Service network, similar to in our county, Pinnacles National Park, or Yosemite. There are other national historic sites that are small in San Francisco and other areas throughout California and throughout the country. That designation is more than just designation. It would actually be under National Park Service management and maintenance, and require congressional action. which is different than the National Register. So I hope that.
Okay, yeah, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, how ironic it was during the presentation at 5 o'clock. We got to hear the trumpet or trumpet bugle, for, it's the end of the day at work and probably time to make the soldiers way to a meal. But that's been going on for, a very long time. A question I have is in dealing with the notices we received from the Department of Defense, was there a relative time frame? Did staff get a sense of how much time we may be dealing with before they're going to ratchet up and say this wall must be, produced, built by certain dates? So are there any conversations about dates certain in terms of what they're probably saying is compliance?
No, Mr. Smith, there are no real deadlines yet imposed on us.
Okay. The other thing is that I know that we estimate our maintenance costs about $80,000 annually. Our restriction is that we cannot convert it into anything that is a revenue based. So it is a visual park, drive in, hike to, enjoy the park in its rawness, or on a weekend, possibly go to the museum. So the sense I get is the public is fairly committed to that. I'm anxious and want to hear from the audience because we have some members of the audience that have volunteered time and have examined that, and I want to hear from their ideas as well. But I noticed that is a kind of an unknown place that a lot of people, if they discover it, they want to go. They find a way to have a picnic, get out of their car, take the view, take the photographs. So it does get a substantial amount of foot traffic. And as a sidelight, whenever I had my out of town grandson, when he would visit, we would always go there and we would kick the soccer ball, have a picnic, and watch the gophers, and once in a while a stray cat would have some fun. So it's a fun local place that a lot of people go. Yeah, and literally maybe part of the solution is we get more feral cats and put them up there.
All right.
Are we taking notes, staff?
No, so for animal lovers everywhere, we have to do the right thing. But I want to hear from Old Monterey Foundation as well. But I'm really interested to find out how we find out what the public feels about this. And is there an element of this that we can start one of the campaigns where we solicit comments from the public and tell us, have your say, Monterey, specifically about where do you put the park on your priorities? Because I don't think we're going to accomplish the public outreach that we need by just having a study session a couple more times. I think we need to ratchet this up and ask the question of our residents that would provide us the survey in the actual sense of how important is this? How often do you use it? When do you use it? What do you believe it needs? And I think a lot of the public doesn't understand that actually it's ours to maintain and it's military space. So I think the public is probably a little confused about the relationship of this unusual location of a park. So I'm not here to tell you a decision. I've got a few more questions, but I want to hear from the public first. But I think the sense I get is that it's more popular than the numbers we have now. The sense I get is the public is likely going to be very interested in keeping that open and under local control, so we don't have the military. If we were to turn it over and suddenly the military says, okay, that's it, we're moving our gates and no one gets in there. And I know how military works in terms of this notice from the Department of Defense likely will be there irrespective of which garrison commander is in charge. So the sense I get is that this is probably a decision point within the next year to have a strategy where we come back with this and chart out some type of a pathway forward, much like we're going to have to do with the old Capitol site. So I want to know more from the public, and I want to know and hear tonight from the members of the public that are here.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I do have some questions. First of all, for our city attorney, I guess just sort of a general question, in looking at the lease, in your judgment, do you feel that the Army's request is consistent with the lease, or not consistent, or ambiguous?
I think we're in a position where we can still work with the Army on what the maintenance would be, but I think the city does see it one way and the Army sees it differently.
Okay, so it sounds like it's ambiguous. Is
I-
that fair to say?
I wouldn't say that the lease is ambiguous. I think.
Do you feel like that the request clearly goes beyond the requirements of the city and the lease?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And then if we were to look at this request as, in essence, a request to renegotiate the terms of the lease, and I don't even know if that's possible, but I'm wondering, if it were, could we look at then renegotiating, for example, the ability of the city to at least recoup our costs, so it could be revenue neutral? Because I can think of lots of ways we could potentially make some revenue that could help pay for some of this. For example, historic reenactment events where groups might potentially lease it out. I could imagine maybe a private public partnership for a gift shop. I could imagine RV camping on the paved part of the area. So I think there are ways we could recoup some of our costs if the lease were renegotiated. So is that possible to renegotiate the terms of the lease or not?
It's certainly possible. I want to share with you, though, the assessment over the decades relationship with the Army has shifted into realizing the history actually started before 1770 on that site. And the Native American tribal representatives will share with you that they look at this land as something very, what's the right word? Sacred with respect to that. So anything that you would do is like dancing on the graves of our relatives. If you provide an event in our local cemetery and have a souvenir shop, you will run into the same issues of those who have their loved ones living and being buried there. And that's how we need to treat the site now. The federal government has really changed also their understanding of that site as something that really is deeply connected with the Native American heritage and culture. And so I want to say it is even something that I feel very hesitant to bring forward out of respect for the site and our Native American tribal representatives who really have a different understanding and a different with, because we are not Native Americans, and so all those ideas are really, I believe, absolutely not feasible. And I feel, Brian, if I misrepresented anything, bring it forward or say something. But I think that is one of the issues also, that this is a really important piece for that part of our history.
I guess another question to kind of respond and follow up, could we partner with some of the local Native American tribes in terms of management and also potential revenue to fund the management?
So that's an interesting question as well, because you have the federal recognized tribes, which are different than the state recognized tribes. So when you partner, which are the ones we have to partner with is also a question that is really not easy to address. And again, I sound like a naysayer, but you really have a set of tribes that are federally recognized, and the tribes that we referenced here today are the ones that I believe are not federally recognized, but recognized by the state. And so any conversations there are probably heavy impacted with potential conflict.
Okay, next question, City Manager, you seem confident that if we don't manage the lease, if we don't manage the property, that preservation and access will continue. And I guess maybe the city attorney may want to also chime in, but is there some sort of legal protection to guarantee that? Or is it more just the sense of that they're probably not going to want to create waves?
9/11 happened. And at that time, the Army built a new fence line directly to protect their installation that goes actually through our leased areas. There were no questions asked. It was clear that the Army needed to protect their installation, and they put a fence line up. So I would not state right now that there will be always access there, because at the end of the day, the federal government has to do what they feel is necessary to protect their interests and to counter any threat scenarios they have. What I'm telling you with 100% confidence is that during our lifetime, no one will ever put a building up there or develop that land. The land will be preserved in perpetuity.
But if it were a national monument or a national historic site, then we could be confident it would be protected.
Yes, absolutely.
Perpetua.
And there's Ned has additional thoughts.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why it's so interesting to pursue this National Historic Site process, and not only designation, but management by the Park Service, the Department of the Interior. By the federal government. There are a number of sites. Pearl Harbor is one example, Pearl Harbor National Historic Site, where it's managed by the National Historic Site itself with the Arizona Memorial, USS Arizona. That's managed by the Park Service, but in the unlikely chance that the Army needs the facility, they can take it back, but it's still preserved for public access, right? So in this case, the Army might be more supportive of a National Historic Site designation because it can still be Army land, but managed by Park Service. The other advantage to this, and we've seen it before in other situations based on Park Service staff sharing with us, is that if, God forbid, there is a BRAC process and a base realignment and closure of the Presidio of Monterey, rather than Lower Presidio going through the entire BRAC process and then potential sale and other issues, it would actually immediately revert to National Park Service because it's already a National Park Service site.
Mm-hmm.
And it would remain permanently part of the Park Service. So that's the other advantage to that option.
Okay, thank you, and I'll hold my thoughts till later.
I can't read my handwriting. Can you describe the conversations that have been had with Congressmember Jimmy Panetta's office in regards to this, if any at all? I mean, I'm sure that there's an interest of trying to help mitigate some of the conflict that we're seeing with the Army right now.
So no, we have not had conversations with Congressman Panetta about that.
Yeah, not about that. We have explored at least what it would look like to work with their office for a National Historic Site designation, if that's something that council is interested in pursuing and the community is interested in pursuing, but not specifically relating to, as Hans mentioned, the wall.
Part of the conversations that we have with his office, I'm sure our representative cares deeply about preserving this space and wanted to make sure that he can help mitigate from his role the conflict that might exist between the city and the Army to help ensure preservation of the space. He really can't read my handwriting. So in the presentation, it was mentioned that the museum is being ran by volunteers on the weekend. Is there a constraint around us opening it up more throughout the week if it's being staffed by volunteers?
So I think one of those things is that you always have to have people to manage volunteers as well. Our museums is an FTE of 1 right now. And so with that, we're running Colton Hall, Presidio Monterey Museum and Pacific Biological Labs, your art collection, Path of History. There's a number of different competing priorities. And so what we have is, if you have volunteers, you need to have volunteers that know the history, that aren't just sitting in there, like opening the door. So we have people, several of them are retired military that are in there, or historians that are in there. So people in those roles often have other jobs. So some of the people come there specifically on Saturdays and Sundays because they work Monday through Friday. So we do tours. When people ask us for tours, we will accommodate those Monday through Friday. I've done tours myself over there and led tours for groups. So it's just really, it's a capacity for us.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's it for questions for now. I have some comments that I'll share after public comment. So with that, we'll open it up to the public. For folks in the chamber, if you would identify yourself by standing up to the left of the podium or raising your hand. And then before we start off in the chamber, I'll check with folks online. If you can use the raise hand function via Zoom, I'll do a countdown to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we have 1 person online. And then in the chamber, we have 2 folks, 3 folks, 4 folks. So I see 2 folks raising their hand, sitting down. Anybody else? I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. All right, so we have 4 in the chamber and 1 online. We'll go ahead and start in the chamber.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and City Council, city staff, and the public. I am Bill Watkowski. I'm the president of the Old Monterey Foundation. Ellen Martin is here, the vice president of the Old Monterey Foundation. And Dave Potter would be here, except he's at a city council meeting in Carmel. The Old Monterey Foundation is a nonprofit institution. We have no staff, and our only purpose is to increase the history and culture of Old Monterey. We have done a variety of projects. We do historic lectures with MIIS. We do art events. We've done other events with the Christmas Angels. Our last event that we did was to coordinate with MIIS mural on the north side of the McCone building for a mural. But by far our biggest project was our involvement with the Lower Presidio. After the master plan was adopted, the city was involved with other big projects, Window on the Bay, the Sports Center, and there have been no implementation of it. Basically due to Bill McCrone, a planning commissioner, and Frank Solicito, at that time a council member, they decided to take this on. And they took it on, especially Mr. McCrone took it on with a vengeance. He knew that the land was preserved, but more importantly than that, he saw this as the most historic, significant site on the West Coast, and he wanted to bring people there. He wanted to have public access there. And the staff report outlines all those various things we've done, the signing right there on the front of the park, the new fence, we replaced the chain link fence, but most importantly, these 2 trails that are ADA accessible and met all the state, all the master plan requirements. So that was done. And I tell you one indication, maybe what Council Member Smith said, when we went to the NIP, at that time it was NIP, not NCIP, they were all committed to approving our project, and they approved it unanimously, and they felt very strongly about this. So the NIP felt strongly. We went out and got money from the Community Foundation, Rotary, and other groups also. The staff report was very well done. I compliment Hans and the other staff members. I have 3 basic issues that I'd like to indicate. The first question, should the city continue access? Yes, it's very important. The city would never close public access to a public park. I know Hans stresses preservation. OMF wants preservation and public access. This park is smack dab in the middle of, right next to Old Town and New Monterey. This is not the old Capitol site. People come there for the museum, military, former military people come there. And I think we, all of us, Old Monterey Foundation, the city, the chamber, may continue.
Unfortunately not. I
Oh.
have to, yes, but if you have additional comments, please share them with us. We'll definitely check them out. And
Alrighty.
thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the City Council for allowing me to share my views on the Lower Presidio Park and Museum. My name is Rini Kimsey, and I am a Monterey City Commissioner on the Commission for Museums and Cultural Arts. The Lower Presidio Museum and Park are part of our purview. For some time, we've had correspondence and meetings with the Presidio and the DLI about this property. Recently, in the interest of diversity and expanded representation, Buffalo Soldiers exhibit was added to the museum, and I think it's been very well received and should have happened a long time ago, probably. People are just not aware of that. In view of our involvement commissions, I would like to request that the City Council allow the Museum and Cultural Arts Commission to prepare a report on our discussions, findings, and recommendations so that we may share this and have perhaps a fuller understanding. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, councilman members and staff, Mr. City Manager. I'm Ellen Martin, and I've been on the board of Old Monterey Foundation for, I think, about 8 years now. I was meeting with Fred Muir years ago, and he started telling me about that land. And I thought immediately after I went and looked at it that we could build a stage and have Shakespeare in the park in the summer. And everything else. And so then later I contacted Old Monterey Foundation because I wanted to get involved. So I've done a couple coordination of events up there. And I've been heavily involved with the grants committee on writing grants. Some of the events that we've done, I've always promoted it as where Monterey comes alive. It's where our history lives. It is the most historic site in Monterey, if not Monterey County and California. And I think that we need to remember that when we're thinking about what is going to happen in the future. It was very concerning to all of the board members when we heard about what the Army was asking of the city and how, wow, maybe they could just ask anything of the city. So what kind of partnership is that? Last year, Dave Potter, who's also on our board, and Bill Wiskowski went and met with Jimmy Panetta. And they met with him because we were under the assumption that we couldn't do anything else in the park until the wall was rectified or there was an agreement. So we wanted to get that finalized or help the city. So we went just and talked to Panetta, and he was very interested in talking to the city and helping Old Monterey Foundation raise funds, whatever needed. When the stables came down, Paul Davis Jr. is on our board, and he did a mock-up of what we could do to build those stables. But anything that we would want to do, we would have to go through the first people. They are, that site is so important to them. And unfortunately, the people that are talking to the Army up in Sacramento aren't the same people who lived here and our tribes here in Monterey. But I was interested in knowing if the National Registry, if that site that you were talking about to make it a federal historical site, is there any other sites within the city of Monterey that has that listing, or in Monterey County itself? Because I'm just wondering that if we're just going in new and asking them for something, or are they already here? Thank you so much. Jean Resch.
we should keep it. It's a beautiful property. Get a partnership with the Army to do the wall, get a partnership with the Community Foundation and the rest of our fundraisers to maintain it going forward, and never give it up.
And next we have Bob on Zoom. Bob, if you could unmute and go ahead, please.
I think I unmuted. Is that correct?
We can hear you.
Okay, my name is Bob Evans. I live in New Monterey. I'm also a member of the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission. And some years ago, the NIP or NCIP spent a number of dollars on producing a plan for the reconstruction of one or more of the Buffalo Soldiers stables. Yes, that was the word I was looking for. And I think, as Rini said earlier, I think that it would be very useful to have the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission produce a report on all the things that we have done there, including the reenactment of the Battle of Monterey when our pirate Bouchard was attacking. And there are a number of other organizations that use that area over the year. And I assume we charge them a small fee to help maintain the area. And they could benefit from the reconstruction of one of the stables, which was actually the plan that was produced several years ago contains 3 alternatives for reproducing the stables. And again, the Buffalo Soldiers, that was a key event in Monterey, just as other key events over the years have happened on that particular site. So I would also encourage you to consider to retain our ability to use it and thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. And that was it, I believe. Yes. Okay. So we'll bring it back to the council. Any final comments from my colleagues?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
I see Dr. Barber has her hand up too. So let's
Yeah.
maybe let her go.
Yeah, let's go with Dr. Barber.
Thank you so much. So yes, just listening to everyone, including my colleagues, and listening to the public, I think it's very obvious that it's something that we definitely need to do a little bit more research. And I like Ed's idea about the outreach of having at least an outreach event. But I also like the idea of the Museum and Cultural Art of being able to prepare a report for our consideration along with the outreach event. And I think I think a lot of these type of the data, that the event and the report will give us data to be able to confirm what will be the best way in preserving and being able to go forth. Because it sounds like, at least right now, of course, this is not total outreach, and that's why the outreach event is important, so we can get more numbers of what other people are thinking about the Presidio and what to do next with it. But it sounds like access and being able to have, the usage to do something is definitely alive and kicking. So I would definitely look to hear more information from maybe an outreach event, some sort of online, like Have You Say Monterey, like Ed was saying earlier, as well as looking forward to seeing a report and suggestions from the Museum and Cultural Art.
Thank you, Dr. Barber. Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I'm reminded that this is a study session, and so staff is basically needing to hear from us. And one of the things under the recommendation is about the staff needs to hear that from each of us.
Yeah, I think that there's got to be a pathway to say that we have a new vision and a new priority for this that includes whatever we need to do financially to satisfy the demands of the lease or of the property owner, which is the military. What does it look like? I don't know at this point, but I know we've got a lot of moving parts and interest, and I think it's a strong interest. The Lower Presidio pamphlet that we received tonight from the Old Monterey Foundation. Thank you for the work that you've done. And I think it starts with that collaboration that we figure out what's the best pathway, and is it trying to work towards getting a national historical recognition? Maybe that opens up more funding. Maybe there's grant opportunities there. If we do have that heightened registry, I don't have any idea how long that kind of takes, but I would imagine it's very complicated, but that's on the federal side. And we certainly would want to specifically go to Congressman Panetta and figure out how we could do that if that's what the priority is. Funding is the biggest thing. If the military holder of this property is saying that we're going to have to contribute something to fix the greater problem, which is along Lighthouse Avenue, then we're going to have to address that at some point. But fortunately, there's no time frame right now. They're going to have a plan, and they're going to have to know that we're going to follow up with it if we're going to continue to be a leaseholder. I think the public has a high interest in it. I have a high interest to see that it's preserved and under the city's control. I'm not interested in trying to look at a development where we're bringing a high traffic amount of folks, high number of visitors, impacting the traffic. It's the kind of location where we have to be very sensitive to the visitation that we get and the nature of the visitor and the period of time. But there's certainly enough room up there to have events that maybe we are not having enough events that brings the public up there so that they're aware. I know that whenever we've had an event up there, it's hugely popular and people attend. So why would we want to not pay attention to that? So I'm about trying to find the right pathway, the right partners, and the right ability to find some money to be able to do what we need to do. I don't exactly know what that looks like in connecting all of the pieces, but I'm not ready to say that I want to turn it back to the military. I take the other angle. Refine the interest of how we make sure that the property owner is satisfied with our occupancy, and see if we can't carve out some new languages from them that enable us to see other opportunities that might be public partnerships, other groups that come alongside of the city and enable us to be able to raise some money, qualify for grants, and to be able to fix what the military perceives as a safety issue on Lighthouse and fix that, and then heighten more education about the historical significance, as well as making sure we connect the original tribes that are here, whether it's Sacramento recognized or our local American Indian colonies. We need to make sure that we connect them to part of the solution as well. Because I think there's probably some funding out there that would certainly help us. That may still mean that some of this money that we solve this problem with is coming from general fund money. And if we solidify some type of a plan, I'm cognizant of the fact that we can't overspend our budget. But for this, I consider it a worthy cause, and I don't want to lose the park. One last thing I want to say, and I know we can't break the rules and ask somebody to come up and tell us anything, but I want to put on a pitch for the Monterey Foundation. Can we make part of the presentation or on our website that we received this and put a link to their website, so that we can make sure that we continue, because I think that there's significant work that's been done by the Monterey Foundation, and we need to make sure that the public really knows about that. And I think the best way to do that is to help navigate the visitors from the City of Monterey website to the Monterey Foundation website. So anything we can do to enhance that awareness, I think that would be a benefit to the overall efforts to make sure that we invest the effort to make sure we maintain the Lower Presidio and hold on to our history, because I don't want to see it go away. And I don't want the Department of Defense, as much as we love them, we know things can change. And the worst thing that can happen is 2 gates are erected at the Lower Presidio and we're denied access to that. And as a kid, I used to go watch fireworks on that hill at that monument and did lots and lots of exploring, some of it not supposed to be in parts of the military base as a kid. But
Say that louder into the mic, please.
yeah, well, statute of limitations run out. But I lived on the other side off of Highway 68 and Huckleberry Hill, and that's the access point for me and my brothers. But a lot of history going into Presidio Monterey that covers from Lighthouse side, Monterey side, all the way over the hill in Pacific Grove. So that's a long way of saying I think that the other cities on the peninsula will value this and may actually help be a partner in this solution. So I don't want to leave out Pacific Grove or Seaside or Sand City. So I think the rest of the peninsula needs to partner with us to preserve this original first park. Carmel as well. And I wish Dave could be here. Yes, he's on the board and he's probably going to watch this tonight. So yes, I recognize Carmel as well.
Or Bill will back brief him for sure.
Yes,
So
yes, we'll hear it.
please.
So for me, I think first and foremost is maintaining both preservation and access. I think that's absolutely critical. I think that whatever we do, we need legal guarantees that preservation and public access are something that we can be certain of. So that's one thing. How to do that? The best way to do that, I think I'm open to different ideas. We've heard some ideas expressed by staff. We've heard some ideas expressed by the public. I will say this, that in terms of kind of the maintenance costs, staff said that's about $80,000 a year. I do think that's a good use of public taxpayer money. I think when you look at the historic nature of that site, $80,000 is a small amount to pay to preserve that and make sure that the public has access to it. But obviously $1.5 million or more for a retaining wall is a much bigger lift. If we do retain management of the site, I think we're going to need the help of our partners who helped us before. So the Old Monterey's business group and the foundation and NCIP and other groups that have been mentioned, which leads me to my last point, which is I support Councilman Ed's suggestion that we need to do something along the lines of a Have Your Say Monterey. And I also think that we should have a public forum with invited that could be hosted by the Museum and Cultural Arts Commission. I do think they have a role to play in this in terms of making a recommendation, and they could possibly host a forum that should include Congressman Panetta or his staff, that should include the military, that should include state parks. And if we can get, maybe Congressman Panetta's office could get someone from national parks to attend. The business associations, neighborhood associations, historical associations, all of those different groups that are going to have an interest in that, because they're going to have the same restraints we have, and they're likely not going to have the money to do what needs to be done also. But I also have concerns about just handing it back to the military. I don't think that's something I'm comfortable with at this time. And I think there's the potential for doing something with our partners. And if this could become a national monument, that actually, or a national historic site, that would even be better, because that would bring with it resources and The one thing I don't completely agree with you, Councilmember Ed, is I think this is an underutilized site. I think that it's something that we should want more people to experience and to learn about. And possibly if this were a National Historic Site or a national monument, that would bring with it not only resources, but also more public notice and possibly public enjoyment of the site. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
So I've been advocating for the opening of a park center for a while. Along the same lines, I wouldn't be in favor of pulling out of the lease and possibly restricting the access to visitors in this case. So if anything, I would advocate for more opportunities to have educational programming, historical programming there. As I think about my experience going through that park, for years I went through there using it to get onto the Presidio, and it really felt like more of a cut through than entering an actual historic park. So I think there's a opportunity there to really make it a little bit more welcoming and really engage public and visitors to come through. I wonder if this is also could potentially be a good opportunity for a collaboration or a partnership with Big Sur Land Trust. I know that they do similar work, but I don't necessarily know that they do it with historic parks. So yeah, those would be my comments. Thank you.
I think the big question is maybe less about access and more about whether or not we continue the lease. I think that kind of seems to be the crux of the question here. I think it seems pretty clear that everybody agrees around the need to have public access, how we do that moving forward, whether the city retains the lease, whether we try to find a partnership with another organization, whether we give that back to the feds to manage in some other capacity. So I think we had just drawing that distinction there is important because it seems pretty clear that we're all on the same page. I mean, I agree with the idea of public outreach and I would third the idea of leveraging Have Your Say Monterey, supporting the Museum and Cultural Arts Commission and helping to facilitate a conversation, and their recommendations to the council will be helpful in our effort to try to solicit broader public input. Another big part of the question here is city dollars. I mean, I guess I would ask in the budget, there is there's a line item for the Presidio Historic Park Museum. And I'm assuming that's just for the museum. That doesn't mean the maintenance of the rest of the Lower Presidio. Is that accurate? Yes. So the 80,000 includes that 25,000 more or less, depending on the fiscal year, plus the maintenance. That's the 80,000 number? I see. Oh, you weren't getting, okay, you were just adjusting. Okay. I think that, to me, and this is where I think Congressman Panetta would be helpful in the dialogue. If the city ended the lease, particularly because of the retaining wall, the Army still has the obligation of putting up the retaining wall. So why are they trying to put that on us? I guess I just am struggling to understand the logic around what the Army is trying to do when it seems like we've been good community partners in creating a public space for such a historic site. So I really urge us to dig in deeper and making sure that we're finding the stakeholders necessary, particularly Congressman Panetta, on helping to mitigate some of the issues as it relates to the retaining wall and otherwise. I think it's helpful if maybe we come up with what seems to be and I don't know if this is a separate conversation that we have on the council, but Monterey is a historic city. And so it's important that we have some part of our budget allocated towards preserving our history. Maybe there needs to be a conversation around what does that look like and what's a reasonable amount, as opposed to, I think, cherry picking a particular site. I think we just kind of helping to set the framework in regards to what that looks like in comparison to other elements on our budget. I think it's maybe easier to say than do, but I think going through that exercise might be helpful. I agree, National Historic Site. I think we should definitely do that either way for all the same reasons that Councilmember Hoffa outlined. If the land use changes, we want to be able to retain that. A couple of other ideas just want to throw out. I mean, I think I agree with Councilmember Hoffa on this as well. I think we need to be able to expand the usage of the Lower Presidio. It's a beautiful space, and I'm not saying we should have high traffic, vehicle traffic pass through, but to use and appreciate our history, I think is a really important thing. And so idea number one, I think we should partner with the hospitality industry. Right now, See Monterey is going through their campaign of having folks stay another day, the extra day. And so what a great opportunity for us to dig in deeper with hospitality on building in this historic experience that we can provide folks while they're here visiting. And that goes for Colton Hall, Lower Presidio, and otherwise. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And part of this is me thinking big. I'm not saying like, let's talk about this over the next like 5 years, but like, could we do something that appreciates the indigenous community more? I recognize and appreciate the conflict that exists, but just because there's a conflict doesn't mean that there's not something there for us to address. We have to have the conversation. We have to figure that out about how we proceed. Last idea, and I appreciate Councilman Garcia alluding to this a little bit, but I think we should and could do a better job of partnering with MPUSD. And like, how are we maybe checking in with the history teachers or the social study teachers on an annual basis, just to be like, hey, reminder, we have this like really great asset. We're willing to do the tour for you if you bring your class by. I think getting our youth there, like almost as a requirement built into the program, I think is such an essential part of them appreciating the local history that we have right here in our backyard. So those are my ideas. I'm going to stop those there. A couple other thoughts. Clearly, this is a treasure for Monterey, but as was alluded to in the presentation, I think that this is a national treasure as well. And so I think we need to make sure we treat it as such, and it goes from the appreciation of the first people. I particularly appreciate the history as it relates to Buffalo soldiers, and all the opportunity that exists in recognizing our history. So bottom line, I say we don't give up the lease until we figure this out. I think we need actually one last thing. In the pamphlet that the Old Monterey Foundation gave to us, and thank you for this, Bill. It says on the back, Old Monterey Foundation has successfully raised $1.3 million. Kudos to the team for doing that, to complete the first phase of the park master plan, with more to follow in phases 2 and 3. And you can visit their website at www.oldmontereyfoundation.org and make a tax-deductible donation to become a member of the Friends of Lower Presidio and sign up to volunteer to help with future events. And by all means, plan to visit this unique jewel of a park in downtown Monterey in the near future. So I wanted to read that because I think it's a good public service announcement, but also I'm interested in hearing more about phase 2 and phase 3. Like, what does that look like as a distinction between what's already occurred under phase 1? So I'm not sure if staff could answer that, or if it might be helpful to have a representative from Old Monterey Foundation come up and speak to that. That's a question to staff. I'm not sure if anybody knows. No. Maybe Bill, would you mind just real quick? That's fine. I'll go ahead and read up public comment. Anybody else in the chamber wish to speak on this item? All right, anybody online? I'll do a countdown to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm gonna give you 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we have enough time.
Our second phase was having a community building that would simulate the stables. And we talked about having all the Rotary and Kiwanis and all those people contributing and paying for a building. It'd be very similar to the stables building. That was actually drawn up by Paul Davis. When we met with the Army, they said there are going to be no more developments going on until the slope erosion issue is resolved. And that's where we left it.
Perfect. Thank you for that. All right, that's it for me. Anything else from staff on this one? Last minute thoughts. Thank you all so much. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this discussion. It's exciting. I feel good after this one. It's really nice to talk. Yes,
Can I
please.
just one clarification?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we disagree. I probably didn't articulate it very well. I think that park has a priority that I think our Parks and Rec commissioners could help us figure this out. But I don't think we want to drive hundreds of thousands of cars to that. I think we need to highlight its walkability, so it's so close to the slope landing, the recreational trail, the whale watchers that go down in droves to the wharf, the folks that walk downtown. I just think we're not utilizing that connection. We can get lots of cars to go to events, but with lots of cars comes lots of other problems. I'm just saying, in a sense of priority, yeah, I want a lot of people to go to the park and enjoy it like we all do, but I think we need to figure that out. And with a lot of groups helping us figure that out in priorities, that I think that we need to recognize its sensitivity and its location to not overwhelming it with auto transportation. Biking, walking, cars, certainly. But in terms of priority, I think it's a little on the sensitive side. So I lean more towards, let's get people there, but with the right mode of transportation and not overdo and overrun the sensitivity of the site with too many cars. Yeah.
Okay, well said. I think with that, we'll go ahead and close the study session and we'll bring it to council comments.
I've got one comment.
Please.
It's good to be home. Spent 11 days gone, 9 days in Florida, dodged the hurricane. Thoughts and prayers to some relatives that are in Georgia and South Carolina that significantly have a lot of work to do. Cousins and an aunt have been without power or water since Wednesday, and it's anticipated it'll be another 2 weeks. So prayers to those that are on the other side of the country to quick relief for them. Donate to your favorite nonprofit that can help and get necessary assistance to folks that are displaced. There are still about 600 people unaccounted for. And when we are on the West Coast and we're looking at what's happening in the news, we know that it's difficult, but until you're in it and among it and you see the devastation, you cannot believe the pictures that I'm seeing. And you're probably seeing them on the national news as well. But relatives that have acres and acres of industrial land, harvest land, farmland, chicken coops, gone off the face of the earth. So prayers to all of them, and please donate because everybody needs help. That's all the comments I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Anybody else? I have a few. We had a M1W board meeting last night. And the big thing out of that discussion is Cal-Am has approached M1W to basically allow them to line the outfall to a standard that allows brine to be pushed out from that would come from the desal. This is one of the conditions that exist from when the Coastal Commission approved the desal project. And it was a very emotionally charged conversation. So I just bring this up to say that we're moving forward with allowing CalAm's permit to go to the regional water board for consideration. It'll probably get kicked back because there's been some changes to it. But how and when do we move forward with allowing their permit when there are a lot of concerns around CalAm's desal project, which is obviously a really sensitive water issue in the region. So just updating folks on what came out of that. Sharing a few other thoughts. Gene Rash brought up about the climate action plan during public comment. And yeah, it is a well-written document. I encourage folks to check it out. But 2016 was a long time ago. And there's a lot of advances in technologies and opportunities for us to, I think, re-engage on that topic. So my hope is that one of the things that this next council could look at is potentially a revised version of our city's climate action plan. So just kind of putting that out there as a thought, and open to additional public thoughts, feedback on that if folks are interested in engaging further there. And then I'm going to end on a somewhat sensitive topic. I'm trying not to make the space that I have here too political, but I also want to ensure that folks feel comfortable in stepping forward and engaging in the political process. And when you have a candidate that is attacking another candidate for being a working class parent and being able to question their ability to be able to do the job is insulting to many people. And I just want to encourage folks that are part of the working class, that are parents, that your voice is just as important as anybody else's. And around the question of whether it's a reasonable question to ask, sure, it is a reasonable question to ask if all candidates are being asked that question. It doesn't matter what your lifestyle is or what's going on, the conditions in your life. You shouldn't be treated differently because of that, particularly when that voice is so underheard and underappreciated, undervalued, underrepresented in this space. So lots of love to my colleague, Gina Garcia, who has 3 little ones in the home, and has been doing, I think, an amazing job trying to balance all that and representing that voice for so many people in our community. But I just wanted to say that I know it's a sensitive topic, but we need to make sure that we're creating a space where every voice can be heard and be represented. And we need to make sure that we're helping to lower the temperature in the room and not allowing some of the stuff that we're seeing at the national level interfere with the positive environment that we need to create for ourselves, regardless of the position in which we come from. We all need to come together at the end of the day and help support moving Monterey forward in a positive direction. So anyways, just had to be said. With that, I'll pass it to Hans for city manager report.
Nothing from me.
All righty. And with that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn.
Closed session.
Oh, just kidding. Yeah, it's not. Oh, closed session. So we're not adjourning. Rewind. We're going to adjourn to closed session. There is one item: closed session conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 5495-6.8. It's regarding property at 587 and 593 Van Buren Street, 424 and 450 Madison Street, adjacent parking lot and area behind the Parking and Recreation Administration Building located at 546 Dutra Street. Any public comment? Anybody in the chamber? Anybody online? I'll do a countdown for folks to use the raise hand function via Zoom to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we have nobody online. So with that, we will now adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
And we're off.